Welcome to the first episode of our 8-day anniversary special of Around the Verse, celebrating Anvil Aerospace. I'm Sandi Gardiner.
And I'm Chris Roberts. So, as a few of you may remember, the Hornet was one of the very first ships we ever showed off because it was featured prominently in the original demo I did back in October 10th, 2012 at GDC Austin, where we unveiled Star Citizen to the world. So that would make Anvil one of the very first ship manufacturers ever to be seen by anyone. The name was actually a nod to my former game company, Digital Anvil, where we developed Starlancer and Freelancer. So that's kind of cool as well. A little history on Anvil Aerospace. It was formed in the late 28th century, and while they became known for their combat and military ships, their first ship was actually the heavy scout ship, the Terrapin. After the fall of the fascist Messe family, the Navy wanted to distance itself from Aegeus Dynamics, whose ships became symbolic of that dark age. The Hornet unseated the Avenger as the Navy's go-to dogfighter, and after decades of service, Anvil began expanding their designs to the civilian market.
Continuing their rivalry with Aegeus Dynamics, Anvil wanted to compete in a similar space with the Aegeus Avenger. Today, they are unveiling a brand new addition to their lineup, the Hawk.
So the Hawk was conceived as a bounty hunter specialist ship that emphasized weapons to give you all the tools you need to hunt down the most dangerous outlaws in the Empire.
Ooh, I want to do that. Let's take a look at the design behind the Hawk and some of the gameplay ramifications.
So the Anvil Hawk is essentially a bounty hunter ship. So this is quite exciting because this is, well, at least the first one I've worked on. It's got a very distinctive silhouette. And its main feature basically is that it has this pod at the back. Find your bounty, whoever that is, throw them in the back, and then they get sucked up into sort of a little separate cubicle, and you get in your ship and fly away. So this is, should be a fun ship.
In terms of equipment, a bounty hunter ship is a ship that can bring another ship down without destroying it, because generally the bounty hunting career seeks to capture alive. Not always, but it's nice if it can work out that way. It's good to have the options at least.
The inspiration was, as the name says, the hawk. So I was just looking at some pictures of hawks and what the colors on the bird. For example, for the accent color, the hawk, I used this typical yellow the birds have around their, how do you call this, their mouth. There's one also quite unique thing about the Hawk. It has a foldable wings. When it is in parking mode, it has a bit the vibe of a sitting hawk, and that's quite tricky to, you have the foldable wing and the foldable the gear at the same time to match each other.
In doing the concept for it, I definitely had this thought of landing outside of town and peering and figuring out the lay of the land and then finding your mark and going for it. One of the things that's also unique about the Hawk is that we gave it a lower windscreen, so you have all the visibility stuff that we wanted above, as well as a center line window that would allow you to look down at somebody you might be chasing who's on the planet. So giving a little bit more thought into pursuit from the air.
The wings in flight mode are pretty much standard, like of an airplane, a little airplane like a Cessna. And then imagine when it comes down for landing, the wings are rotating. First they're rotating back and also downwards.
It is a relatively small ship. It's a one-man essentially fighter. It's got quite a lot of weaponry. We're using similar sort of entry methods to the Gladiator, so the seat comes down and you get in the seat and then it takes you back up. We've sort of taken sort of abstract reference from a Hawk essentially, so you can see it in places in the landing gear and the sort of pose that it strikes when it's in flight mode and also in landing mode basically. So it has sort of nods to sort of World War II sort of aircraft, that you sort of see on aircraft carriers where all the wings are folded. So it looks pretty cool.
Even though it doesn't have an interior space, I always felt as we were coming up with the concept that it had a kind of lived-in aspect to it. Of you found nooks and crannies to put your stuff You know, maybe that holding cell can double as a bed if you're out there for too long. Very much a feeling of being kind of on the road almost, like a self-sufficient.
For the positioning of 4 of the weapons, I tried to get the really aggressive feeling of it. It should look really menacing, and I think I got it quite well. So you have 2 weapons there, one above and below the wings, but behind. So it's kind of something like this here, and looks quite nasty. Huh?
It's kind of middle of the road in terms of its flight performance. It's not a big tank bruiser. It's not the ultra agile ships or super fast, but it kind of goes for versatility in that regard. You don't know what environments you're going to be in. You don't know who you're going to be up against. Better to have options than to always have just the one answer, especially because you came alone, probably. Nothing about the ship prevents you from flying in a wing, but it's also very much built to allow you to fly alone.
You have to be quite careful with this one. It has power when it comes to weapons, because it is 6 weapon slots. But the armor is it's not too much. I think in fights you have to be really careful. And it also has a EMP. You know, this typical round disc shape in the center of the ship.
Because it is the first ship that has any focus on pursuit from the air, getting in that lower windscreen was important for the design and kind of a new challenge for art. Like there's no precedence for that, so they had to react a little bit on that front as they were working with getting the sturdy anvil aesthetic to fit with the new spiky bounty hunter motif without losing that anvil side of it, and get this new thing that no other ship has of the lower windscreen. So we've definitely gone through a couple iterations on figuring out the cockpit and figuring out what that visibility was going to be.
I mean, it's Anvil, isn't it? So, you know, like all the other manufacturers, we now have our style guide that we're working to. So Anvil is classically large intakes, normally say two to 4 intakes, generally 2 large intakes. Fairly sort of planar kind of cockpits, you know, it's quite sort of flat glass. The whole ship is sort of quite geometric. And then there's always a sort of essentially a circular motif in the center of the ship. And that changes in size depending on the type of ship and the role it takes. But, you know, when you put all these ships together, there should be, and there is now, a common thread, basically. So you'd be able to look at each one and go, okay, that's that and that's that. The design is pretty close to what we want. I mean, that's kind of sort of our thing now. I mean, we do spend a little extra time on concepts because we try and work out as much as we can before it gets to the art production team. There's always things that are going to change. And that's the beauty, right, is that we'll take it as far as we can, considering the deadline, which are always pretty tight. And it's art, isn't it? There's no end. You know, you always really just want to push it as much as you can, just keep going and going. But there are times where you just have to stick a fork in it and say this is done. So once the design is done, you know, we've figured out everything. Basically, it's been signed off, second pass art. That's when we then move on to the promotional art. We get a brief from Ben Lesnick, and then it's where we can get really sort of creative. On this one, I pushed it in, deliberately sort of pushed it towards in the direction of Blade Runner style sort of imagery. I've been pulling in all sorts of people for help, you know, getting specific characters in, specific poses, really sort of trying to sell that feel of a bounty hunter.
What we'll be doing in the future is releasing bounty hunting mechanics that will be focused on subduing the player, or actually when you kill them and getting payment back. In the future, when you subdue a player, the idea would be that you would need to take their body, put them into the cargo hold or into the stasis containers that we have, and then basically deliver them to the advocacy office for your payments, and that payment will be different than if you actually kill them and then return them that way. So if a player is captured and then they're taken back to the advocacy office, the idea would be that you're waking up in a prison, and at that point you will have to serve your time. So whether that is breaking rocks or doing other menial tasks around the prison, then you'll have to do that, or you can risk actual jailbreak, and if you and your friends want to try to break yourself out, and then from there you'll continue as a wanted man. With capturing the player, the idea is that you're taking them down with a non-kill way. At that point, you're dealing with an incapacitated player, and you're dragging them, you're taking them back to your ship to put them into the storage unit. So with the reward structure, we'll be dealing with how did you capture them? Are they alive or are they dead? And if they're alive, then more than likely that will pay more, just because of the risk that the player took upon themselves to actually deliver them alive versus if they're dead.
I think that bounty hunting as a career in general is going to be quite interesting. You'll end up in a lot of varied situations, and having a ship that specializes in versatility, that specializes in not being a specialist, kind of seems intriguing to me.
Visit our website for more information on the Hawk and download a brochure. You should also try your hand at the Observer Test for the chance to win a free Hawk. All the rules are on the website, and you don't even need to be a backer to participate. Finally, Anvil Aerospace's full lineup, including some of their limited ships, are all available for sale now until December 4, with a week extension on the Hawk until December 11.
There you go. So besides the Hawk, we have some updates to share on the Terrapin, the Carrack, and the Hurricane. So let's check in with Jared, our artist and designers for ship shape, to see where these ships are in the production pipeline. Ship shape. Ship shape.
Greetings, citizens, and welcome to the brand new Ship Shape, where we give a quick rundown on what's in the ship pipeline, who's working on what, provide interviews with developers, and bring you the most up-to-date news on your favorite ships working their way towards release into the Star Citizen universe. I'm your host, Community Content Manager Jared Huckabee. Now, behind me, you see the ship pipeline, an ever-evolving network of phases, milestones, and requirements necessary before a ship can take its rightful place among the pantheon of Star Citizen vehicles. Whether it's from design to concept, from white box to gray box to final art and flight prep, no ship will be implemented before its time. And this is the process that's meant to ensure the best possible ship for your Star Citizen experience. Today's focus is Anvil Aerospace, and there are a variety of ships already available in Star Citizen for you to fly around in-game with right now. Whether it's the legendary Hornet line of multi-purpose craft, with its stealth, pathfinder, and fighter variants, or the versatile Gladiator bomber with its dedicated turret gunner in the rear, Anvil has a strong presence in the Star Citizen universe today. But there are many more ships the dedicated teams here are working on bringing to the game in the coming months. Let's take a look.
The Terrapin as a whole is meant to be a military exploration vessel. That's its primary role, is to be sent off into the deep, dark, uncharted space and just find out what's going on and report back home. And so it's designed to be a ship that can take a beating because you don't know, what kind of hazards you're going to encounter. You don't know if you're going to start smashing into asteroids because there's an unknown asteroid belt within this nebula. There's a lot of things that this ship would encounter first that it needs to be prepared for.
The Terrapin, it borrows a lot from its name. It's essentially like a turtle.
One of the things that's unique about it is it has a sort of a hunkered down mode where it will extend out its armor plating and sacrifice some of its mobility to just amp up the survivability. A turtle going into its shell, especially if you find yourself in an unknown situation. You've just shown up on a planet and you're being attacked by who knows what. It can really matter to be able to just have that extra time to step back and think about things while your armor takes all the beating and gives you a moment to react.
So it comes packed with insane amounts of armor, basically. It can take a crazy beating. It does not have much firepower, though. It can do a little bit of damage to try and defend itself, but that's not its primary role. It's not a combat vessel. It's a vessel whose job is to go in, get the information, and sort of get out from a military's perspective, and specifically to do it for uncharted parts of space. And as a result of that, to emphasize how armored it is, it's got a sort of two-stage mode to it where its basic armor set is very powerful, but in addition to that, you can sort of like hunker down and turtle up. And what that'll do is it'll bring armor plates that cover the canopy. It'll sort of deploy those to protect the pilot even more than he already is. And on the flip side of that, it's able to obviously retract the armor, and it's able to open up some of its armor plates to vent out heat. Because one of the things that it wants to try and do is reduce its heat signature a little bit if it's trying to stay a little bit stealthy while it's doing some reconnaissance, and then be able to open up to vent heat.
So the Terrapin, as part of being an exploration ship, focuses on having utility mounts to do various kinds of scanning and deeper material scanning. And when you get to these faraway places that you're busy surviving, you'll be able to come away with extra information about them. And that'll key into mining careers and into jump point charting. You'll be doing all kinds of scanning, and so you'll be able to use that to get really detailed information about whatever planet or derelict or who knows what else that you find out there and feel is worth taking a look at. The Terrapin will let you survive getting in close enough, and you can get a really close look at it.
One of the things that we did really early on was we worked with tech design very, very closely to make sure that everything was sort of to spec. Now, throughout production, things had to change, but once we finished the art on the Terrapin, or any ship for that matter, first goes to the tech design team. And what they do is make sure that from a gameplay standpoint, the ship ticks all the boxes, basically, right? It fulfills its requirements for gameplay. And from there, it'll get sent out to the animation team and the special effects team and the sound team, and everybody starts to work on this beast until it comes to life. Because it is a deep space exploration vessel, it comes with standard sort of a gigantic sensor dish on the back. Now, the Terrapin is also an Anvil ship, and the sensor dish does two things for us. One, from a gameplay standpoint, if you're attacking the Terrapin, that's a target you want to shoot to knock down their sensors. But two, it brings in that sort of circle motif inside of an Anvil ship, bringing the families together. Because the Terrapin looks very different than other Anvil fighters because it isn't a fighter, but we're still bringing in those same, the same shape language, the same colors, the same lighting, to keep the family, identifiable.
So as we were starting to think about like what we were gonna make Anvil interiors look like, a lot of influences came our way. We were looking a lot at Star Wars and Alien, and one of the things that jumped out immediately was the Hexagon patterns. So a lot of Anvil interiors and exteriors have a lot of 30-degree angles that meet to form sort of hexagons that overlap each other, which gives it this kind of it's very strong structural look, I'd say.
It's got these quaint little living quarters that you'll have your little bed, you'll have you'll have food, water. It has storage space for repair items and med kits, and it has a place for your suit, your flight suit, your equipment, whatever little knickknacks you find of particular interest, you'll be able to bring. It's not a cargo ship, but it does have some personal storage that'll let you bring back mementos, or if you find something of particular curiosity, you can bring that back for any research or other kinds of gameplay that we'll be exploring in the future with other ships as well. It has 2 stations, but for the longevity that it offers, it's really a one-person. You can bring others and work as a group, but that'll start cutting into your time out in the field.
It's not really a ship that you're going to want to sort of have a party in. Right? You're not going to bring a ton of friends along. You might bring one so that they can do some of the scanning while you fly around and navigate asteroid fields and make sure that you're not crashing into anything. But it is kind of a loner ship because its primary role isn't within combat. So even within a fleet, if you're working in concert with an entire fleet, you're still kind of doing your thing off on your own.
We've had to revisit the concept a little bit, not least of all because the original concept didn't really fit metrics. So it's grown in size a little bit. We've tried to keep that down as much as possible and still have like a reasonable walking space. We tried to stay as true to the original concept as we could, but things like the implementation requirements of landing gear, for instance, which we had only vague notions of when the Terrapin went into concept, requires a lot more clearance underneath the ship than the original concept than the original concept afforded it. The other ships that transform for their landing mode wouldn't be able to land without doing so. Whereas this armor deployed doesn't change whether or not the landing gear is available, but it does change characteristics of flight. It does change characteristics of how it handles incoming damage and how it reports the state of the ship with the interior art, the lighting, any indication on your MFDs. The armor does reduce visibility. You'll still be able to see outside, but normally you have this huge open canopy to look out, and the armor deploys over some of that cockpit window. The thrusters on the Terrapin are able to articulate, and so the mains double as the VTOL thrusters, which means that they'll be able to handle hovering for basically any duration of time. We have, as we move forward with our flight concepts and our IFCS implementation, we have heat engaging more and more with the simulation there. And the need for specialist thrusters to handle sustained thrust, especially on these heavier ships, which really all of our ships are quite heavy. They're a lot larger than they might seem at first blush when you have this grand scope of planets. But when you get down to it, this thing is quite massive. It's quite heavy. It takes a lot of force to keep it in the air. It's not a dynamic ship. It's not an aerodynamic ship by any stretch. It's a flying brick. And so it uses its main thrusters as VTOLs to keep it in the air and keep it equally maneuverable, kind of regardless of the situation. It's never super agile, but it doesn't either have a point of disadvantage for its flight. It could just use its mains. The focus is on its survivability, on its ability to take damage, and so keeping everything encapsulated is not wings to shoot off. There's not anything out and vulnerable. It's able to sort of package itself up and hunker down for the long haul. And in doing so, it just needs to make sure that it has its thrusters in a position where they can keep it aloft for as long as you need to. And so they'll be able to do that. This one has been a challenge as well because this is our first Anvil with an interior walking space. Figuring out how to extend that art style of the canopy and the cockpit to also be bulkhead and the room layout and what does an Anvil door look like. This is the first one. So we had to spend some time thinking about that. spend some time thinking about how an Anvil ship reports the ship's status when you're not in the cockpit. How the lighting, a lot of these things come together to communicate to the player their current condition and what gameplay options they have available to them, what concerns they have pressing. Anvil has physical displays, and so one of the things about, like, the distinction between Anvil and Drake is that when Drake has a control panel, it's a button that you're just going to pound into the wall and expect it to not break in doing an open whatever. Where Anvil, it will have a display. It'll have, you know, these touch screens, but not something that would be nearly as fancy as what RSI would do. They might start to incorporate holographic displays and things like that. So it's a middle ground between the pure function of Drake and the aesthetic form of MISC and RSI.
One of the cool things about Anvil is that it is like a military manufacturer, so it's very utilitarian, very cold, kind of lifeless, very utilitarian. Everything in the ship kind of has a purpose, or should look like it has a purpose.
As an exploration ship, it's one of the smallest. That gives you the ability to go anywhere. It might be the kind of thing where you go explore, and once you know where that thing is, maybe you come back with backup, or maybe you go out and you find cool new locations for outposts. The Terrapin is the ship for would-be explorers to set out on their own, see what the universe is like, and have a decent assurance that they'll survive it.
For entry-level explorers, Anvil provides the rugged Terrapin, currently being worked on by the ship team members here in our Los Angeles studio. I'm very pleased to report it's progressed all the way to the final art phase, where it is currently in the tech setup stage after a successful gray box period. Now, seeing this sturdy-looking ship work its way through the pipeline here in our LA studio has made me a fan all over again. And you can bet when all is said and done, you're going to see me tooling around the stand system in one of these hardy ships from Anvil. Of course, with exploration such an important part of the Star Citizen experience, we can't all be flying Terrapins around, although I'm willing to try if you are. For those of you looking for something a bit more robust and iconic, Anvil will have you covered with one of our fan favorite ships. Let's hear from the team currently working on the Anvil Carrack.
The Carrack is the first ship in production for deep space exploration.
One thing we've learned on our bigger ships that we've done before is that everything is being driven by interior. There is no point starting the exterior work until we're 100% happy that the interior works exactly as it should. It doesn't create any problems. All the vis areas are working fine. There is enough room for everything. Nothing needs to be shifted. Because before, on the first ships we've made, we kind of tried to build both at the same time. And that started causing conflicts. And you had to go back and redo quite a lot of things, which we kind of stopped doing fairly recently. And starting on Reclaimer and now Carrack and a few other ships that we are building on right now, exterior always started a little bit after everything else.
Think of honeycombs, how honeycombs stack with each other. We're trying to develop all the floors and the rooms to feel like they're stacking with each other into this honeycomb design. We're trying to stick to like no 90-degree corners. It's all 30 and 60 degrees. All the floors are raised up and all the pipe work and machinery is all underneath. The lighting we're going to go for is very blue overall feel with a red accent colour in certain places, and it's very heavy military inspired.
Right now, I'm kind of know that the ship got a little bit bigger than what it was originally planned, and as usual, this is caused by the difference between the initial blockout and how much room we actually need as artists. Like put some nice layering on the walls, like whenever you have pipes, whenever you have stuff cutting into it, even if player cannot get there, you can see this stuff. And the deeper it gets, the more layers you get, the more interesting it has, especially in a style like Anvil's kind of interior, which hasn't really been shown before to the public yet. No one actually seen the Anvil capital ships. This is going to be the first one. This is going to be the big one. So the visual style is very, very, it's very layered. It's very kind of utilitarian. It's very militaristic. It's much more militaristic, I would say, than what Aegis does. So just because when the ship was planned out, every kind of room, we had like, well, let's say 25 centimeters for every wall, and then another room started. We need about 2 meters between those rooms because we need at least a meter to start putting things in. That difference, that pushes things a little bit. Luckily, it's usually uniform. So the ship, even if the ship gets bigger, it doesn't really get bigger only in one direction. It basically just scales up by, I don't know, 20% or depending on the ship really and on the style. So the exterior visually isn't going to change much. The way we build the interior seems to be fairly consistent with what we wanted to do with the ship originally. It follows the original guidelines quite close. And then the exterior, except it's going to be a little bit bigger.
We're just moving on to detailing up certain areas. We've got 3 main core archetypes. We've got engineering, medical and habitational and technical. And we're picking 3 different areas from those, and we're doing pure max concept work for what these areas could look like. So the length of the ship has got bigger. For example for that would be the drone room. We're using the reclaimer as the basis for how big this drone room can be. And the first initial designer blockout for that was literally almost like a cupboard in size. So we've just had to increase that on the length of the ship. And basically, it's pretty much like that on every single room, and it's just got slightly larger and larger and larger. But it's not crazy large. I think it's got about 30 meters longer than it was before. The ship contains its own little scout ship for when it I think it discovers a planet. It can use its scout ship to obviously check out the planet or debris or space wreck, whatever it is that they find. It also has a hangar for a Anvil-style-esque rover, which has got to be created yet. And it's also got 3 modular pods on the back, which can be customized by the player. At the moment, we are currently just doing the cargo units for those modular pods, and design will tell us what the other specs are for the other pods that can be switched out.
It's pretty much a Prometheus from the movie. Of our universe. This is the explorer's ship. This is the ship that you can basically just get a crew of other 5 people and just go on an adventure of exploring planets. And you can spend on this ship months or years. You just go, and it's self-sustaining. It's really, really mobile. You can modify it, or like you can customize it to some extent, depending, do you want to do like a deep space exploration or planned exploration, or do you just want to haul some cargo into a very, very long distance? There will be a possibility to play around with that. It's also fairly well armed, so it can defend itself. If it's gonna get attacked, it's quite good at it. It has possibility of on-foot exploration, so it has a rover. Because it is the exploration ship of the universe, the whole interior is gonna feel very, very open. The canopy that you can basically hang on top of the visual, like a lot of windows, a lot of nice visual, like open rooms, especially on the top deck. Even possibility to walk easily on top of the ship, like the top airlock is going to be connected to a set of balconies that kind of will be going around the hangar for the smaller ship. You can kind of just walk there, and instead of forcing yourself, there will be just room for players to walk around it, which is going to be really, really nice.
So the entire ship is done, white box. The only part that hasn't been done yet is the bridge, because that's going to be needed to be done in conjunction with the exterior, because it's heavily tied in with that. So when that gets kicked off, the bridge will be done to white box standards. Other than that, it's pretty much ready for us to go on to final art in all the areas and take rooms to final.
Everyone's excited about this ship. This is the best ship. This is probably the most anticipated ship, at least on the Reddit community. It seems to be everyone's loving it. I love it. I think it's a really, really nice concept. I think it's a really, really nice design, and I'm really, really into just building it and making it. And I have quite a few ideas of how to make some of the yet unresolved stuff on the concept work, obviously with support of other artists, and yeah, everyone just loves this ship, and this is gonna be something else.
The Carrack! I'm happy to report that the Anvil Carrack, which entered production at Foundry 42 UK recently, has successfully completed its white box review and is currently moving into the earliest stages of gray box phase. Now, for a ship this size, there's still a fair amount of work to be done, but it's beyond thrilling to see this beloved ship currently making its way through the ship pipeline. Stay tuned for more information as it becomes available. Now, not everyone is interested in exploring the cosmos. In fact, if my time in Arena Commander has taught me anything, it's that many of you like to bring the pain down on others with a torrent of blistering firepower, and few fighters can match the raw armament of the Anvil Hurricane. Let's check in with the ship team here in LA to find out more.
So the Hurricane conceptually has been around for some time. It actually went through concept work right as I was in the middle of production for the Caterpillar. And that ship's whole purpose is to sort of be a bit of a glass cannon.
We wanted a turret-centric fast attack ship. So it has a custom turret mount on it where it has a couple more guns than we normally put on a manned turret. And then that turret is bolted onto a sleek, fast airframe that will be able to get a good top speed without being too imbalanced in its own self.
Its job is to fly right into combat, bring in massive amounts of firepower, and then try to get out before, things go wrong, essentially.
It's not going to be the most nimble handling ship. It'll be capable, but it's really going to be set to make sure that the pilot is lining up their turret gunner for the best possible shots, so the turret gunner can just unload with the massive cannon array up there. And when I say massive, the ship right now is spec'd at a total of 6 size 3 guns. So 2 of those being on the ship itself, that could be either a gimbaled size 2 or the fixed size 3s. And then 4 size 3 guns on the turret itself that can just point and scream in something's direction and make it disappear.
There's a couple of key things that we tried to stick to with Anvil. Specifically, their fighters, they have features on them that are pretty identifiable, which is somewhere on the ship towards the body, they tend to have a sort of a ring type of design. So if you look at the Hornet, you've got the ball turret in the back, and that gives you sort of the ring motif on it. The Hurricane has the same thing. It's got the turret, the actual man turret in the back, which has that. The Gladiator also has an exhaust in the back, which is that sort of same type of shape. They also tend to have oversized intakes on the sides of the cockpit. That's kind of something that they do. And they have blunt noses. So their ships don't tend to end on a smooth nose. It's usually chopped off. So it's like sort of a flat nose. Then we've also got other things which are really cool, where our lighting setup for Anvil is very high contrast, cold and hot. So what that means is that inside of Anvil ships, you'll notice that it's mostly sort of a cool blue, and those are the lights that we'll have. And then the points of interest will be highlighted with bright red lights. And that gives you a nice contrast in there, which is pretty cool. And it's pretty unique to Anvil. They're the ones who tend to do that the most.
So the turret assembly on the Hurricane is really going to be its defining characteristic, where it's a bespoke setup for that ship, where Anvil has other ships with turrets out there. The Super Hornet has a remote turret setup. The Gladiator has a little manned trouble bubble on the back of it. But the Hurricane is very much the core of this ship's armament and its killing potential is going to be built into that turret housing. So making sure that it's going to be as just vicious as possible for the damage it has to put out.
Specifically, and mechanically, it's taking a lot of inspiration from the Gladiator. So the Gladiator has, it's a bit of a controversial feature, but it's got a bottom-loading pilot seat and gunner seat. And so this ship has the same thing. So you've got a bottom-loading pilot seat, what that means is in order to get into the ship, you don't climb into it the way you do a typical fighter. The seat itself descends from above So you go under the ship, you look up, you say, I want to get into this ship, and then the seat comes down on a bit of an elevator sort of rig. You sit on it and then strap in, and it pulls you right in and then comes to life as you enter the cockpit. So the same thing happens with the gunner. So both load in from the bottom. What's cool about this ship, though, is that there's quite a bit of space between the pilot and the gunner. And so there's no interference on the Hurricane getting in and out independently. So you have complete freedom to get in as the gunner, you have complete freedom to get in as the pilot, and they don't interfere with each other.
So do you want to do a strafing run against a ground installation? You may want a Hurricane. Do you want a couple of just like forward attack ships before you send in a larger fleet to soften up some hard targets? You may want a Hurricane because you have say you're coming against an enemy Idris. Well, send 2 or 3 Hurricanes down and just pepper the sides of it. Do some strike passes against it. Don't try and just sit in front of it and keep shooting, but keep doing some passes against it, and you're going to start chipping that thing down while the rest of your force gets up there, and it's like, all right, now we're going to just blow up this capital ship because these Hurricanes have helped weaken it and just drain its combat potential.
What's also really cool about the Hurricane is that in addition to having the bottom-loaded elevator rig, we are planning to find a way to allow you to sort of EVA out of the ship through the canopy as well. So you'd be able to sort of slowly get out without having to use the elevator to get out. Now that's not currently set up, but that's sort of what we're trying to accomplish with it. And we're also attempting to accomplish ejection on both the gunner and the pilot. So if you really need to get out in a pinch, just press the button, it'll shoot you straight out.
Because the Hurricane is benefiting from work already done on ships like the Anvil Hornet, the Gladiator, and the Terrapin, the Hurricane is making solid progress throughout the pipeline and is currently in the gray box surfacing stage. With this progress, we're moving steadily towards a day when Citizens can bring its 6 powerful guns to bear on targets in the persistent universe and Arena Commander. It's gonna bring the pew-pew, let me tell you. Well, that's all I have for you today, but on the RSI website, we've got the Observer test running where you can have your chance to win a brand new bounty hunting ship, the Anvil Hawk. It's no purchase necessary, and the full rules are there on the website for those of you who are interested. I'll be back again tomorrow when we discuss one of our most prolific manufacturers in the Star Citizen's history, Aegis Dynamics. Back to you, Chris and Sandy.
Terrapin is looking great, and it's cool to get a look at the early stages of the Hurricane and the Carrack.
Yes, it is. That's it from Anvil Aerospace for day 1. Be sure to check out our store as well to receive 20% off all of our merchandise until December 4th. For those of you who are celebrating Thanksgiving, we hope you have a very happy holiday.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. As always, thanks to all of our backers for your ongoing support and feedback. It's really appreciated. We're going to have a special happy hour next Friday to celebrate us all and have you vote to create a brand new Drake ship to go into Star Citizen.
Tune in tomorrow for our next ATV special where we take a look at Aegis Dynamics and what they've been up to.
Yeah, definitely do that because I think it'll be pretty cool. Until then,
we will see you around the verse. Ready? And a hawk in a pear tree.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.